Was TB Joshua the devil, or was he truly a man of God? BBC just released a 3-part series on the disciples of TB Joshua, tagging them a cult. And in this documentary series, a lot of people who had worked for him, who were in his church at the time, who had been with him for over 15 years, were the ones speaking out. It's more like a revelation than a mere interview. Some of these things are brand new accusations that we had not heard before. Because I know back in the day, we used to hear people try to expose TB Joshua. I think at least 2 of the people that I saw in the video, the Nigerian man and the Nigerian woman they called Bisola, I think, I'd heard about their stories. I know back in the day they tried making a video and a tape exposing TB Joshua. It was all for money grabs. As I remember back in the day, they were looking for money. And it was also said that they apologized. And they also showed videos of them saying that they were not good people. So I guess it was easy for us to dismiss that, even though some people believed them. However, this BBC documentary, I tried my best to watch it with an open mind. And even in this, my review here, I'm going to try as much as I can to be not biased. Because in the end, it's just a mere accusation. However, some of these accusations were so strong. And even if there weren't concrete evidence to prove certain things, the fact that these were people who walked hand in hand with TB Joshua, the fact that these people knew certain details that people did not know, the fact that these were people who, even in camera, we saw them work for TB Joshua. They preached on his church. They did his television section. The fact that these were people from different ethnicities, different countries, different race, it is hard not to see that there might be a little truth in it. If you haven't watched the documentary, I would suggest you do. If you're a big fan of TB Joshua, you probably wouldn't. However, in this video, I'm just going to share my thoughts and my opinion and hopefully get yours. You see, in the beginning part of the video, one thing I noticed is that, like I said, these are people who actually have worked with him. TB Joshua had a group of team of people, according to what I got from the entire documentary. He had a team of people. He had workers, people who did editing, the videography, the protocol, the ushering, and these were the people they called the disciples. So they were not just workers, but they were called the disciples. And they lived in the church. They had a dormitory, a hostel for them. Many of them claim they've been there for 14 years, which is weird to me and hard for me to believe. They claim that some of them, especially the foreigners, when they came in, their passports were taken and they were sort of brainwashed into working for TB Joshua. You have to put in mind that for a lot of them, this was doing the Lord's work. It wasn't like a prisoner kind of thing. They came in with the intention of serving the living God, and they came with the mindset that TB Joshua was the chosen one. And that was why it was easy for them to be manipulated the way they were, according to them. I personally, watching the interview, I could tell that they were just trying to put a lot of the blames for the things that, even if it happened, they also took part in it. But yes, they blamed it all on TB Joshua, and I can see why, I guess. Now, a lot of things were said. It's almost an hour for each episode, and I'm not going to go into all the details. I wanted to keep it brief. So these are the few things that caught my mind. First thing first, it was revealed that TB Joshua had a daughter from another woman, and the little girl called Ajoke lived in the synagogue. It was believed that he was trying to keep her a secret. However, over time, he stopped treating her nicely and forced her into being a disciple and told other disciples that she is possessed with the demon and encouraged them to beat her at any time they felt like. And it was said that this little girl suffered tremendously in the hands of her supposed father, Pastor TB Joshua, that other disciples were beating her. And all the other disciples said the same thing. All of them said the same thing in their own special interview. You have to put in mind that this interview was conducted, according to them, for 2-3 years. So many of them did not see each other when they were getting this interview, because some were in the UK, some were in South Africa. So not many of them saw each other. However, their stories seem to be corroborated. They all seem to remember the girl and how the girl was treated and beaten, and even how the girl eventually confronted TB Joshua and was locked in a room for months and then eventually kicked out. That part struck out to me. I would have loved to know how she moved on with her life, how she found a family. They made it seem like when she was giving birth to, she was brought to the church and she grew up there. I'm wondering if she had aunties, uncles, or people she could have gone to meet, because they made it look like she came out of the church and went into the streets, and I don't know how she was able to survive. I would have loved to know how she did, who she met, where she stayed, But that was shocking to know that, or to hear that TB Joshua would treat his child that way. Although it was understandable that that was not from a legitimate marriage and it was from out of wedlock. And to be fair, that girl looked like TB Joshua in my eye. Of course, TB Joshua was accused of being a sexually perversive man, that he sexually assaulted a lot of his female disciples, that he made them believe that he was doing them a favor by doing sexual things with them. There was also the accusation that some of them got pregnant. And I noticed it was only the black ones. Now, some of the white ones admitted to being sexually assaulted by TB Joshua. But when it came to the pregnancy and the abortion part, it mostly came from the black ones there. One of the girls, one of the white ones, the one that was a lesbian, did say that she wasn't penetrated because she was very young at the time. So I guess in my mind, he was strategic with who he would penetrate or something. It just confused me though. But the other women there, some of the other ones, the South African women, the Nigerian women who were making their interview, did claim that they got pregnant at some point and they had to take the baby. And some of the operation or the medical procedures to remove the pregnancy took place in the synagogue in the medical department, which I would believe was spearheaded by some people in his disciples, because his disciples were many. They were not 1, 2, 3. In as much as there were only about few of them who gave interview, in the video where they were having their meetings, you could tell that TB Joshua's disciples were almost 50, if not 100. Now, in the beginning of the series, in the episode 1, there was something interesting that I think caught my attention in a way. It was made to believe that TB Joshua started off in Nigeria, obviously, but then they made him look like he had some kind of mastermind plan. And that his master plan was to get the attention of the Westerners. He wanted white people to be in his church. And the way he did it was to film and record a lot of his miracles in his church and a lot of his preachings, and he did a lot of that. And it was said that he spent a lot of the money that he got from offerings and all of that into making VHS tape or this cassette tape, videotape, because this was back in the early 2000s, if not late 90s or early 90s per se. And he carried a lot of these tapes and sent them abroad. And that was when some of these people who became his disciples, some of these white people or these foreigners who became his disciples, first saw his video. They saw the videos, and in this video, they saw him perform miracles to people who were injured, people who were mad, people who were crippled. And these were Christian white people who were looking for salvation. And when they saw this video of this black man performing miracles, they were wowed and impressed. And some of them in that moment realized that they were coming to TB Joshua and they wanted to be among of him. They wanted to see how he does it in person. They came to Nigeria to worship with him, and then they realized that there was space for them to walk with him. And that was how they came to be. Now, that his right-hand man claimed that TB Joshua told him directly that his plan for the white people was to enslave them because of what they did to black people. That was one of his motivations. And he succeeded from what was said. He claimed that when these white people come, that they were his target audience, and that was what he was going for. That was why he did those tapes and sent abroad through some means, and eventually he got the international attention he was looking for. Now, these disciples claimed that while they were disciples, that he had rules, that there were strict rules, which kind of makes it a cult in a way, that the women could walk around naked, that everybody were in their sisterhood, and that sometimes if you wanted to pee, you have to take permission from TB Joshua. And if you wanted to sleep, you have to be permitted to sleep. That TB Joshua did not like sleep at some point. That sometimes he will punish people who, if they slept. There was even a particular accusation or a scenario that was painted in the documentary that shocked me, where it was said that one of the workers, one of the disciples, was sleeping and his mouth was opened, and TB Joshua sent 4 boys to pee in his mouth. That is just inhumane. If that ever happened, then that is bad. There were claims that these foreigners who were his disciples, the white ones, were forced to cut communications from their family, not really completely, but limited, that they should not talk with the family, because he really wanted them to focus on working for God. And by working for God, it means working with him. Looking at how it turned out to be, it was not the best experience for a lot of them. Another aspect of the documentary that was also interesting was not disciples, but a group of people called the Five Story Brothers. I don't know how many there were originally, but in this interview, only 2 of them gave their confessions, and they did give some serious revelations or accusation. Now, these two boys were the Five Story Brothers, and the reason why they are called the Five Story Brothers is because TB Joshua had his room in the fifth, in the top floor, and I think in the fifth floor, and they were the only ones allowed to go directly close to him unless he asked for you. Even his wife did not share a room with TB Joshua in his chambers. So the only people who were allowed access to that floor where TB Joshua stayed in his room were the Five Story Brothers. Their job was to work with him, clean for him, do his laundries, cater to his needs up there. And if he wanted to see any of the disciples, he would ask them to go down to call them, which they did on some few occasions. Now, these Five Story Brothers, in their confession, revealed that whenever TB Joshua goes to take a shit, that they're the ones who take him to the toilet, that they had to hold him to sit down. It's not because he was injured or old, that it was just a service thing for him, that they will stand nearby him as he takes a shit and as he cleans up. They revealed one very weird thing that they saw happen one time. That one time after he was done cleaning up after himself, he took honey and rubbed in his private part, and they were confused as to why he did it. It was later on that they realized why he was putting honey in his private areas. Now, these boys, the Five Story Brothers, claimed they slept in the bathroom floor of TB Joshua until TB Joshua asked them to go back to their rooms, because now he wants to use his room. So whenever they go to their room, which was close to his room, one of them claimed he peeped one night and saw that TB Joshua was being given oral by one of the female disciples. And that was where they pretty much assumed that was why he puts honey in his underwear, in his pants, after cleaning up after himself. That part was disturbing. And I don't know, I did not know what to make of that part. A lot of these accusations or a lot of these revelations were very strong and very detailed. And coming from people who worked for him, and lived with him, it's almost hard not to believe. Now, so the next part of the documentary that struck me was the prayer mountain. It turned out that it was said that TB Joshua had a prayer mountain where, that looked like a park of some sort that was built away from the synagogue. From what it looked like, you have to take a boat down there. And there was a man who worked there for TB Joshua along with many others. So this particular man also gave his own interview. And this man is somewhat elderly. So, well, he had some things to say. It made it seem like that prayer mountain was not where you go to pray for 50 days and 50 nights. That in fact, that might have been a shrine for the most part from what was described. According to the man, the day he knew that that prayer mountain was where it was one time when TB Joshua came and cut part of his beards and cut part of his pubic hair and put it in the mouth of a fish and threw the fish back into the water. That was when things started getting odd for him. The next thing they said about the prayer mountain was that there was a part where TB Joshua was accused of asking one of the Bisola women to find virgins for him to defile. And according to the accusation, when TB Joshua was done, he would take the bed sheet to the prayer mountain. It wasn't stated what he did with it. That was as far as they said. So the next thing that was said to have happened in the prayer mountain was him having photographs of all his disciples, all the workers, mostly the females, and had candles around them. And he would wear a red cloak, and with a sword, he would do some fetish things on their photographs, especially those that ran away afterwards, those that escaped later on. But I don't know if whatever he was doing with those photographs ever happened, which to me, in my opinion, if he did that, and if TB Joshua had some kind of juju power, then something should have happened to these people. But it seemed like nothing happened to them. You see, for me, the interview is left and right. It's difficult to believe it completely because there were loopholes to it. And at the same time, it's hard to disbelieve it completely because these are people who worked for him. I mean, they all can't be lying. Even if they're lying, there got to be some truth to it. What is the end game? Now that the man is dead, what exactly are they trying to achieve? And I heard they weren't paid for it. So it's almost hard. And also, a lot of these things were things that have been said long before by these two Nigerians, so exposing. A lot of these were things that have been said before. Some of them, shall not all. So that prayer mountain was weird because the man who worked there said the same thing, and one of the boys from the Five Story Brothers said the same thing regarding the prayer mountain, that it might have been a place for his source of powers, which I would guess he used for the miracles. However, they claimed the miracles were fake. I don't know if I've talked about it before people accuse me of repetition. Although the people claim the miracles were faked, that miracle part expose was not convincing for me. They did not do well in trying to explain how a lot of these miracles were fake. I have always thought some of the miracles were staged and faked, but I really needed an explanation from people who supposedly were there. However, I wasn't completely satisfied with what was said. The explanation to the miracle did not hold enough water to me. What they said was that although some of the things that they said that I could believe was that the people who came for certain ailment was not their original ailment. That if you came that your leg was hurting you, you'll be forced to be put in a wheelchair so that you'll be asked to stand up and walk, because these people could walk normally. So when they came to the synagogue for miracles, they were brainwashed or made to sit in a wheelchair. The only thing that them being able to walk normally meant that their leg hurts or what is paining them, but they could walk. However, then those with actual cancers were asked to go home. It's those that had deep injuries that were made to say they had cancers, so that when their injuries heals, it will mean that the cancer was healed. Although I didn't get details, I wanted to know, there was a part in the documentary that showed a lot of women rolling on the floors, crashing their private areas after he blows the powder. I don't know. I wanted some more explanation as to why this man kept doing this. Is he acting? Were they paid? They didn't speak on that. I want to believe he's acting, but I wish they delved more into the miracles and how fake it was and how they staged it a little more. I wish they did, but I guess they did the best they could, or maybe it was lost in editing. The best was not good enough, honestly. What I really wanted to know regarding the miracles that TB Joshua performed as regards the accusation that he was fetished and had juju and had demonic powers, I wanted to draw some correlations with his fetishness and the miracles he performed. I wanted to know if those miracles or those deliverance were sham. His ability to make people roll on the floor, his ability to make people act weird, his ability for them to act like they're on fire. I wanted to know if that was staged, if these people were hired and paid. Then if any of them had come out, I would have loved to see them in the interview along with the footage of them pretending to be rolling on the floor. But they didn't go deep into that aspect of the miracle, because I really wanted to know. If it was staged, then that means he never had any spiritual powers or any juju powers, which means he must have just been a mastermind manipulator and a show businessman using religion as his niche. However, if it wasn't staged, which meant that he did have some kind of dark powers or spiritual powers or whatever powers that can help them collaborate their juju story. Because otherwise, if he had a shrine and tried to kill these people with this shrine, none of these people that they said he killed died. So if he was that powerful spiritually, then why wasn't he using swords to cut his disciples' face walking? Why wasn't he using his charms to kill these people when they ran away to expose him? It did not make sense to me that somebody being accused of having fetish powers or being accused of having a shrine or being accused of using juju and spells still could not kill his enemies or hold his people down completely. It did not make sense. The only thing I could believe was that he was very powerful. He made himself so famous, so powerful, so strong that he had politicians and he had a fan base of people who worship him, who call him daddy, and he could use those people to do his dirty job. As far as juju and spiritual powers are concerned, they didn't help me understand that part in the interview. They didn't hit that nail on the head there at all. But I guess, we move. Now for the part of the story that I think got to me, which was the collapse of the building in the synagogue compound. I remember hearing this story back in the day. I didn't really follow it that much. It's TB Joshua, so there was a lot of cover-up then. So I guess the cover-up also affected me. However, this interview did a lot of expose on that. And I feel like if you need to know more about the synagogue building collapse that happened years back, you kind of need to watch this video or the documentary, especially in the last episode, in the third episode, I believe. And that was where they talked about how the building fell. I remember back then they claimed it was bombed because they're trying to kill TB Joshua. And in this documentary, they talked about it. And in my mind, I was like, I don't even believe TB Joshua, even back then. When TB Joshua made that video that if you watch the video, you could see an airplane circulating around it. And after a while, the building collapsed. That they are targeting me. They are coming for me. Don't worry, guys, it's not you they're coming for, they're coming for me. It did not make sense because if they're coming for you, they would not target your guest house. They will target your main church, your main building, your house itself. So it did not hold water to me back then. And I think I agree with them in this documentary where they said he tried to cover it up. He tried to play it out. He tried to overpower the press. And one of the five-story brothers who worked in the press was also in this interview, said that when the building collapsed and people were down in the rebels fighting for their lives, TB Joshua asked for them to record it, that they did not even allow ambulance in to come and rescue them initially. That for what it was worth, they had to stage a group of people and to make it look as though they were being rescued. They had to fake people as though they were being rescued, making them shout, "Praise the Lord," so that when these people are being carried out of the rebel of the building, they will shout, "Praise the Lord, hallelujah, yada, yada, yada." It was later on that the figures of the amount of people that died were released because the main work was done later on in the night after the press had gone initially. That was when they said they all came out and started bringing out these bodies and putting them into body bags and taking to ambulances. Now, the thing behind the building collapsing, although TB Joshua claimed it was bomb, they said he was aware that the building did not have a strong foundation because it was rushed. He wanted to make money from the building because these guests were paying to be in this guest house. They were paying thousands of dollars. These were people from South Africa, the US, Brazil, and many of them lost their lives in that building collapse. In fact, not many people survived. The few people that were said to have survived were the ones who they may have staged. And it doesn't even end there. It doesn't end there. Even after these people died in his synagogue, he didn't take much responsibility for it. Although he did something that was interesting. He ordered some of his disciples to fly across the country to go to the homes of these victims and drop money. Just drop a bag of money and not say anything, which meant that he was trying to pay them off or pay them to be silent and not fight back. Because the case was eventually taken to court, the court found out that the building was not because of bomb, but it was because of the foundational problems, the construction problems, and they wanted TB Joshua to be held accountable, which they said he never showed up in court, and they kept postponing it because he had the powers of men in offices who could delay it for him. That even up till now, the families have never gotten the justice because they want officials of this church to be held accountable for the deaths of these people. But it's been over 10 years and nothing yet. The victims of the people that died in that building collapse was kind of like the part of the story that got to me. And I think that's the one part of the story that I believe completely. I believe that part 100%. And I don't doubt that because it was important for him, for these people to not, like, his reputation was more important. TB Joshua, even the way he spoke, I mean, for you to come to your church a day after the building collapsed and killed over 100 people, and what you're telling your church members is, don't worry, guys, they're not coming for you, they're coming for me. But they just killed some of your church members. Are they not important? And who is the day? Oh my God, it was just stressful to watch. However, though, the rest accusations, they were pretty strong, but there were still rooms for doubt. There were some parts that did not tally for me. I'm not trying to discredit these people. This is their truth. I believe them partly. I can't give them my full belief, but I believe them honestly, especially those women who spoke out about the sexual assault and the removal of the pregnancies. It's hard not to believe it. You can't make that stuff up, I guess. We are used to discrediting and not believing black women, but I don't doubt them. The only problem now is that I feel like they are not the victims. I'm sorry to say. I am very sorry to say. I want to apologize. The real victims in this story were the people who lost their lives in the synagogue church. These women or these disciples who are giving these interviews, I don't see them as victims. They're all presented like they were victims, but I don't think they were victims. There were parts where they even admitted to participating in certain things that did not make sense. They only regret later. And it's common with cult churches. We've seen this many times. We saw it in the Kanungu massacre. We saw it in the Jamestown massacre. We saw it in the one that happened in Kenya, the one where they were made to starve to death. We've seen this multiple times. It's just that TB Joshua's own was, in my mind, I feel like if his own was a cult, he did not deliberately or directly want to kill anybody, even though that carelessness happened in the building and that happened to these people. Maybe he thought God would hold the building down, but he didn't. kill anyone for what was worth. He just, according to the accusation, he just put their life in danger. So that is there. However, like I said, it's hard to believe these people were victims. I did not see them as victims. Their stories is touching. I just felt like they gave themselves up. They weren't dragged from their house abroad to TB Joshua's synagogue. They came because they were looking for something, and when they did not find the thing, they start to act like they were victims of something. Maybe they are victims of the manipulation, maybe they are victims of whatever it is TB Joshua was doing, but it was right in front of them. There were instances. How do you work for a man that you think is manipulative for 14 years? For a man who you say sexually abused you as an adult, you kept staying there and preaching on the contrary with him for 14 years, blaming it on sleep deprivation, that because he didn't make you sleep so long, so you not know that that was what you were doing. Again, I want to believe them, but I wished they did not try to make themselves look like victims, where in my mind they participated fully, given that they were all adults and mature at some point in all of this chaos. For somebody to manipulate you as a full-grown adult, you have to let it, in my opinion. I don't see them as victims, but I don't doubt their stories. I just don't see them as victims. I feel like there are probably so much more that they did not say, so much more that would implicate them. Because they kept saying that some of these disciples were beating the wedlock daughter of TB Joshua. So who was the disciples? Don't tell them that none of them had a hand in it. None of them would say Nambina. They were like, oh my God, I can't believe I watched it happen. Oh my God, I'm so sorry I was there and it happened and I did not do anything. So who was beating her? You mean all 6 of you did not put your hands on her? I wish they took more responsibility. They just washed their hands off it and just put it completely on TB Joshua. And that did not make me feel like they were credible enough. Because I know when it comes to church cult things, from what we've seen, a lot of these cult members are very participant. They're fully active in some of the evil deeds, in some of the acts, in some of the devilish things that is being done in these cults. But this group of interviewers did not admit to a lot of things themselves. However, again, like I said, I believe their stories, just not very completely, because I wish they admitted more. But that is just my take. That is just my opinion. I think the documentary is great overall, is insightful, is touching, is believable. It's needed for what it's worth, because where there is smoke, there is fire. But you guys let me know your thoughts. If you've seen the documentary, let me know what part got you. Do you believe them? What part do you not believe? What parts do you believe? Let's share our thoughts and let's keep our opinions, nice and respectful. Thank you for watching.